Wheel of Fortune. A show recognized for its large cash prizes and imagery of Hollywood glamour, or it's just a show you remember watching from when a family member wanted something going on the living room TV. But regardless, Wheel of Fortune has become a staple of game show television, still having millions of people that watch it to this day. And in its nearly 50 years on the air, there's been tons of attempts to adapt the show into video games. And these games are a weird little collecting obsession of mine, since I find it really funny to see just how different each version can be. There's been dozens of Wheel of Fortune games released on different platforms over the years, and some platforms have even gotten multiple different versions, so there's no way I can cover them all in one go. So consider this kind of a part 1, but without too much preamble, let's start off with one of the first Wheel of Fortune games. Wheel of Fortune was first released on the NES in 1988 and was developed by Rare, the company that would go on to make games like Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie. And then the game was published by the company GameTech, who seemed to be known for licensed games on NES and PC at the time. But we start up the game by choosing the number of players, whether we want computer players, and then the computer's difficulty level. Then we enter our name and the game starts. Right from the start, it's a pretty good recreation of what the show looked like at the time, with smooth animation, good sound effects, and an actually good-looking 2D wheel. Which, trust me, that'll seem like a luxury soon. But from there, it's the standard Wheel of Fortune formula. After the 3 standard rounds, the person with the most money makes it to the prize round, where you can actually just keep telling the game to give you a different prize. And there's such wonderful things as a skiing trip and new Deluxe kitchen. Suddenly this name doesn't sound so ridiculous. And after that, the game just resets. But overall, this is a pretty good early look at how Wheel of Fortune would work as a video game. This was the first of 4 Wheel of Fortune games released on just the NES. While Rare would develop the first 3, the last one would be handled solely by GameTech. And this will be far from the last time their name comes up. Jumping up a generation, we have Wheel of Fortune Deluxe Edition on SNES, which, yes, means that there's a separate non-deluxe version out there. But this version starts up with a really well-composed 16-bit version of the Wheel of Fortune theme. This version had no involvement from Rare and was just developed solely by GameTech. But this version actually mentions Vanna White by name, unlike the original NES game. The game is set up in a pretty similar way to the NES version, where you select your number of players and enter your names, but now you get to pick from one of these lovely characters to represent yourself. And I'll go with this guy, cause he looks kinda funny. Getting to the game screen, it's a pretty similar look to the NES game, but with some more detail and some better menu graphics. And every time you pick a letter or lose, it cuts to these silent reaction shots of your characters, which is honestly one of the funniest parts of this version. Although this game can feel really surreal at times. The lack of music and sound effects, coupled with the aforementioned really funny character expressions, give this game a really weird tone. This version goes on for 6 rounds, unlike the NES's 3, but here you actually get a random prize. But I didn't complete my puzzle, so I missed out on this very compressed picture of a beach. Damn. After this, the game just abruptly jumps to credits, including a line advertising Jeopardy! Sports Edition, coming soon, 30 years ago. Jumping much further ahead, GameTech lost the Wheel of Fortune license in 1997. After that, it got passed around a few companies through the late 90s and 2000s, but by 2010 it had made its way to THQ, not too long before they would go up in flames. But they would go on to release new versions of Wheel of Fortune for all the major 6th generation consoles. And the first, and arguably most popular of these releases, was the Wii version. I have a lot of memories related to this game and playing it with friends and family, so I definitely have a ton of bias in saying that this is probably the best Wheel of Fortune game. Starting it up on the Wii menu, we see the company logos and are brought to the title screen. This version is actually missing the classic Wheel of Fortune theme, and instead uses the new theme introduced to the show in 2007. In general, the game takes a lot of its branding from the identity shift the show was going through at the time, including these little caricatures of Vanna White and Pat Sajak, which I always thought were just meant to be knockoff Miis, but were actually used in show intros from around the time the game released. Getting back to the game itself, we're met with tons of options, including a contestant creator, which lets you play as your Mii. Hell yeah. And gives you quite a few clothing options for your Mii. But the customization feature that by far makes this one of the most memorable versions of Wheel of Fortune is the WiiSpeak support. The WiiSpeak was an accessory made for voice chat in select Wii games, but for Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, THQ added the feature to record your own victory and defeat catchphrases. And this feature is just... absolutely amazing. You can also use it to speak your answers, but that doesn't work quite as well. This version, like the others, obviously follows how the show was at the time, meaning the 3 toss-up rounds that were introduced to the show in 2000 are here. Additionally, between every round is a minigame that usually just involves guessing a half-finished puzzle taken from the actual show. When setting up a game, you can pick from multiple different stages, but you have to unlock them by winning them on the prize wheel during the final round. And in nearly 12 years of playing this version, I've only ever unlocked one. But this version actually controls really well. Since it's a casual Wii game, it of course uses motion controls to emulate spinning the wheel, but it actually feels pretty good because it's still your timing that matters, rather than the game actually trying to gauge how hard you swung the Wii remote. And trust me, this will not be the case in another Wheel of Fortune game we'll be talking about some other time. In this version, prizes are given out both at the end of each round and on prize wedges on the wheel. In this playthrough, we won handprints, pictures of Pat Sajak, a pair of jeans, some shoes, and the entirety of Rome. On the same day as the Wii game, a version also released for the Nintendo DS. Now, Wheel of Fortune hasn't had a lot of versions on portable consoles, opting more for things like dedicated handhelds or plug-and-plays, but the DS version is pretty comparable to the Wii release, with most of the same options and rules. But instead of using Mii's, disgraceful, this version just has its own built-in character creator, which lets you make your own Wheel of Fortune Sona. Just like the Wii game, this version also has its own unique control method, which is using the DS's touchscreen, which actually works pretty well. And there's not too much more to say about this version, other than it's a pretty good handheld version based off the Wii game, or that I now own Rome twice. And for one last one today, Wheel of Fortune on PS1 was developed by Hasbro Interactive and Artex Studios, and was released in 1988. While setting the game up, there are a few different options depending on how long you want it to last, like having a game with just 3 rounds for example, which probably would have been a good feature on some of these other games. And like the Wii game, this version also has multiple stage options, but here they're all unlocked by default. Except for some reason you change them in the options menu, and not when you're actually setting up the game, which is kinda weird because you'd think that'd be the option that people would want to change the most. But like, it still works. But for the actual game, there's a lot of mid-90s early CGI charm, with stuff like the animated menu elements or the exaggerated way the camera moves. There's even an FMV version of the show's intro at the beginning, though I guess they didn't even want to attempt at 3D modeling and animating someone walking by the board and manually flipping the letters, so they just have Vanna White narrate the game from a screen next to the board. A last thing to mention is that while playing to get footage, the Player 3 CPU was just absolutely brutal, winning every single round, and there isn't even a difficulty select. It's like they just gained sentience and absolutely killed it, which is honestly hilarious. But yeah, quite the random topic. No clue if this will stick with the audience that found my last video, but I still hope you enjoyed it. I still have more Wheel of Fortunes to talk about, so if you like this, I can definitely make more. But for now, I'm gonna go find out what I'm gonna do with my 2 identical copies of Rome.